Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I am absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to interview Eric Hodgdon, who will be speaking to us from Riverview, Florida. Not for nothing, I grew up in Florida, so he's got a point or two in his favor here. Eric is a coach, an author, and a trainer who has experienced the struggle that grips us after the loss of a loved one because he lost his precious 15-year-old daughter, Zoe, to suicide in early 2014. When he became frustrated with grief support resources that focused on survival as the end game of a grief journey, Eric made it his mission to change the way we approach grief support. He has coached and trained thousands of grieving women and men on how to navigate one of the worst setbacks in life. And his inspiring #1 Amazon best-selling book titled A Sherpa Named Zoi serves as an insightful guide along the journey through grief. Eric also has a TEDx talk titled What My Daughter's Death Taught Me About Life, and he has been featured on Option B, and he moderates an online grief and loss support group of over 27,000 members. A few weeks after losing Zoe, Eric told his friend, "This feels like I am walking through a dark chasm with no map." His friend replied, "Zoe will always guide you." I'm looking forward to talking with Eric about why most people merely survive the loss of a loved one and struggle for the rest of their lives, how to walk through grief and live with intention, the way connecting with Zoe in a meditation saved his life, how Zoe now guides him, and much more for what is surely going to be an insightful and meaningful interview with an incredible person. Hi, Eric. A really warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much, Irene. I'm really grateful to be here with you and to speak with you and your audience and to help them to get to the other side of what they're struggling with.
I think this interview is going to help a lot of people, Eric. I'm really excited about it.
Yes.
So let's start by getting everyone to know who Eric is. Would you start to tell us about your childhood, your early career choices, and how did Zoe come into your life?
I appreciate that question. I'm a son of a Navy pilot. We moved around quite a bit when I was a child. Dad got orders every 3 or 4 years to go to a different base. And so we wound up landing in Brunswick, Maine, of all places, when I was 7 years old. We moved in the day Elvis died, strangely enough, and he was supposed to be playing up in Maine at that time. But I had a pretty normal childhood. I grew up in this town that had about 15 to 20,000 people, and pretty much everybody knew each other in a lot of ways. And when I graduated from high school, I was really into computers. Computers were really starting to come online, so to speak, back then in terms of just popularity and usage. And so it piqued my interest. I didn't have any interest to go to college. I just wanted to learn how to write video games. That was my thing. But they didn't have any schools back then that taught that. And so a couple years after I graduated, I was working in a local shipyard, actually, as a computer programmer, but it wasn't the ideal situation. It really wasn't resonating with me. I didn't find any passion in it. And so I got an invitation to move down with my best friend in Tennessee. And so I took that opportunity at 22 years old to move to Memphis. And within 3 months, I found myself actually building computers. That became a passion for me. And that was one of the a turning point in my life in terms of understanding that going after something that you're passionate about really can give you purpose, and it also helps other people to achieve goals, whatever that may be. In this case, I was building computers for people because they wanted computers. But that career actually gave me 25 years, and I was so grateful for that. And probably towards the tail end of that career, I started to I moved back up to New England, and I was working for a mobile phone company at the time, and I was introduced to Zoe's mom. Her name is Maria, and we got together. We had a great relationship up to a certain point, and ultimately Zoe came into the picture on October 18, 1998. 5:10 p.m. Zoe was born, and it was one of those moments where a father looks at a child and says, "I'm going to do everything I can to be the best dad for you." And
it was the moment you fell in love.
Yeah. And it's different for dads than it is for moms. Moms obviously are carrying the child for all those months, and dads are just being introduced to the child at that moment. But yeah, it's a very strange but beautiful connection that's made instantly. And so Zoe had a fairly normal childhood. She had Graves' disease as a child. And
Did
so
you explain what that means so people who aren't familiar with it, Eric?
So Graves' disease is an autoimmune deficiency. And so it attacks your body. Your body feels like it is constantly under attack. And so your immune system goes into overdrive. And when she was 4 years old, she had her thyroid removed because her thyroid was also inflamed. Her body was just kind of attacking itself, so to speak. And so once her thyroid was out, they put her on some medication that seemed to stabilize a lot with the Graves' disease, and really didn't have any long-lasting issues with that. And then her mom and I ultimately did break up, and probably about 6 years into that, there was a situation that came up in the family where I needed to step in and to take custody of Zoe. Zoe's mom was not in a place to take care of her at that point. And so I stepped in, and Zoe was just struggling with it. She was 13 at the time, struggling with just life in general, a lot of changes.
Tough age.
It is a tough age. It's a very tough age. And so, yeah, tough age. And when ultimately Zoe was just struggling. And so she had to, I had to have her, not say put into an adolescent unit, but at that point, it was probably the best option for her because honestly, I wasn't equipped as a parent to deal with those situations. And I obviously wanted her to be safe, and I wanted her to be healthy as much as possible.
Yeah, but she eventually took her life, right?
She did. Yes. Unfortunately, in January of 2014, I thought we were on the other end of this struggle. I remember a few months.
How long had she been in the facility? How long had
Well, she'd been in and out of 4 different facilities over the course of 18 months. And they weren't terribly long stays, but there's something that happens, I believe, to kids when they go into an adolescent unit where they don't come out and feel like, okay, everything's good. I'm good to go. It was that, no, this is really, I'm still struggling with this. I don't know how to shake what I'm feeling. I don't know how to feel better. And, kids that age, their brains aren't fully developed. And so a lot of times teenagers are thinking an hour ahead at the most. They're not thinking long term that they might be able to get through the challenges that they're dealing with. And so ultimately, yes, Zoe did take her life. And it was a very hard, unbelievable event.
You found her, right?
I did, yes. So she came home. She actually had moved from the hospital down to what's called a group home. And she was able to come home and see me on weekends. And so this one particular weekend, I picked her up and we're back at my house, and she's upstairs in her room. And she's just, she's trying on different outfits. She's putting this henna tattoo on her hand. She's messaging a few people, some friends. And I asked her if she wanted to get something to eat. And she's like, I'm not really hungry, and I really don't want to hang out with any friends tonight. And so I said, okay, well, maybe we should just kind of relax tonight. And she's like, yeah, it's a good idea. And at some point she came downstairs and she gave me a big hug, and she went back upstairs, and I went back to my computer to do some work. And then a little while later, I went upstairs and I opened her bedroom door and I found her. And I could not believe what was going on. It just did not seem possible in any any thought process. It just is not something that you would ever expect to see. So
shock. And it's like you did everything you thought you could. And what is this?
Right.
My goodness.
Right.
And then you probably felt, did I have something to do with this? You feel the guilt and everything.
Of course.
And in your book, you talk about that Zoe's funeral service reminded you of a colorful pile of string with knots in some areas, intertwined and tangled, with the end of the string sticking out from the bottom of the pile. You want to tell us a little more about that? Because this is what kind of symbolized what was ahead of you, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I try to think of things in metaphor and an analogy, just because it when you're trying to explain to some people, what is this like? What is grief like? And it's a mess. It's just a big mess because everything is tangled. There is no straight line through grief, through stages of grief. It is taking a step forward and taking 10 steps back. It is crying all day and then wondering how you're going to carry on. It is wondering what your purpose is for being here now. But you're looking at this ball of string, and all of that, all of those emotions, all of the guilt and the worry and the uncertainty about the future is all wrapped up in this mess of string, and it's got knots in it. And if you want to untangle that, the only thing you can do is start at the beginning and start to unweave this ball one knot at a time, 1 inch of string at a time.
But in the middle of all this unweaving, you've also got the fog, right? That you're dealing with, this big fog. I mean, because we go into this humongous fog of grief. So you speak about how a therapist, counselor, or mentor can help a person move through that fog to find purpose. You want to share that with us?
That's a really good question, because I believe that when you're going through grief, especially early grief, there's loneliness. You feel lonely in a lot of ways because your loved one isn't there. And the fog it's like you're standing on the shore of an island and there's a dense fog bank that's right there in the ocean. You can't see the waves, but you can hear them. This fog bank represents the grief and the barriers that grief puts in front of you, because now you're disconnected from your loved one and the people that care about you. And it's not your fault. It's just the way that grief shows up for you. And so it's very isolating, and it can feel like you're all alone and that nobody is there to either understand you. And there could be people right next to you talking to you, but the grief brain, the fog, is you can't remember things. It's hard to concentrate. You almost feel like you're going crazy, and you're not. It's just your brain is protecting itself. It's protecting you and it's a form of shock. And so it's very difficult to navigate that and to also deal with the grief at the same time.
Yeah. So how does a counselor or mentor help a person move through that? You're a coach, question. So you must help people to move through that too.
Yes. Well, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, how do you guide people to move through that, or just to be patient with their process? Or
that's a really good question. And I think that first of all, I believe that time is not the driver of your healing. It is a companion. There's a myth that time heals all wounds. And I think you're going to be waiting a very long time if that's the case.
There are people who live with the grief forever and they never heal.
They don't. And it's almost as if, they're okay, any day now, I should feel better. But it does involve you taking some steps forward. And, in the loneliness of grief, there is something that happens when the grief doesn't serve you any longer. And as you emerge out of that fog and the emotions start to hit you, you're processing and metabolizing those emotions. But at the same time, the thing that can help not only with the loneliness, but the grief, is to find some companionship. That if you feel like you've been pushed down into this abyss, when you start to emerge from that abyss, imagine stepping out into this very lush garden, and there's other people there who are also going through the same situation as you in terms of grief, but it's a sense of community. It's a sense of companionship. Well, it's not the companion that you had when your loved one was here. It's a sense of companionship here that is also filled with empathy. People get what you're dealing with. And so it is a really good way to kind of move away from the loneliness and connect with people, no matter if that's an online community, an in-person group, but connecting with others
right. Or
who
even a therapist or somebody, a guide
correct.
or a coach, right? Because I have to say that that's what happened for me. The first thing that I did when Saul transitioned was I found a life transition coach, and like
Yes.
that was made a huge difference to me. And I also have to say, you speak a lot about beaches, and you've
Yes.
got a great story about Zoe stones that you found
Oh,
on Santa Monica Beach, California. You want to share that with
yeah.
all of
I
us?
will. Yeah. No, thank you. This is one of my favorite stories of Zoe, and it's wonderful because I feel like there's still stories that are being made with Zoe, and it's been almost 10 years. But I was out in California, in LA, for a trade show with a company that I was working for, and I was responsible for making sure that all of the equipment that we shipped out there got shipped back, and everybody left the day before. Well, my boss left a vehicle that he was supposed to bring back to the airport. But he left it with me. And at first I'm like, dude, you can't leave me a car like this. But he did. But wait a minute, I'm in LA with a gassed up vehicle. I'm going to go places. I'm going to go check some things out. And I had never been to LA before. And so I was just super curious about what was around there. And I just drove, and I found myself from downtown. I found myself over in Santa Monica, and over at Santa Monica Beach. If you've never been to that beach before, describing it, it is a very wide beach, meaning if you park in the parking lot on the road and then you walk to the water, just a straight line, it'll take you 15 to 20 minutes. It's a hike. It's a good hike, but it's a beautiful beach. And I had always made a promise to Zoe after she died that any trip that I took, I was going to find a rock from this location, and I was going to bring it home, and I was going to put it in her room on a special cabinet and tell her a story about it and where I got it from. And so this was no different. And so I started to walk from the parking lot to the water. And the problem is, Irene, that there's no rocks on Santa Monica Beach. It's all sand. It's just sand. And so I'm like, this is going to be interesting. There's no shells and there's no rocks. And so, but I'm walking and I finally find this one rock, and I'm like, okay, my job is done.
I did it.
I did it. I'm going to go put my feet in the water. And so, but I'm zigzagging. I walk another direction for another 5 minutes, and I find another stone. And then I walk in another direction. I find two more stones sitting next to each other, and I just put them in my pocket. And I do go down to the beach, down to the water, take my shoes off and socks off, and I'm standing in the surf, and I'm just looking around. There's nobody there because it's that May rain, June gloom time of year, and it's overcast, but it's warm. It's very warm. And I just say, God, Zoe, I know you would have loved it here, because she was a big Red Hot Chili Peppers fan, and they're from Santa Monica. And I'm just, so it was all these things happening at this moment, and I'm realizing. And I took a few pictures. I took in the sights and the sounds and the smells while I was there, probably there for about another 15, 20 minutes. And I made my way back to the car. I go back to the hotel, and I go up to my room, and I'm just emptying my pockets, and I put the rocks on the table, and I kind of, okay, wait a minute. I take two of those stones and I moved them over, and it spelled her name.
Wow.
And I started to cry, Irene, because she was there. She was there. I'm not that creative. I could not have ever imagined that the four stones would write her name, and it was the exact spelling, Zoi. And I just knew at that point that we were always going to be able to connect with each other in some way. It wasn't going to be direct like you and I are talking,
right?
But through other means.
Oh, absolutely. And then you have another story about how you connected with Zoe in a meditation that you say saved your life, and that she now guides you in your life. You want to tell? I love that. Would you tell us about that? Because I get guided by Saul also.
I love that. I'd love to hear about that too. This one situation, this was a few months after she had died, and I was at work. I had gone back to work, and I had one of those moments where I was sitting at my desk, and it just hit me. All of it hit me at once that, oh my gosh, she is not here anymore. She's not coming back. There's some fantasy I had in my head that at some point she was going to walk through the door and, this is just a bad dream. No, she wasn't coming back. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And so I went into my boss's office and I said, I'm sorry. I was kind of trying to fight back some tears. He's like, he saw it. He's like, go home. It's fine. It's all good. And so I go back and I took a commuter rail from Boston to where I lived. And so I got on the train, and this was early enough in the afternoon where there was nobody else in the train. I went up to the second level of the train and I sat down. There was nobody else on the train, but Boston's a city, right? It's noisy downtown. And I just closed my eyes and I just imagined being in the most peaceful place possible at that point. I needed to feel some peace. I needed to feel that something was going to be okay. And so when I closed my eyes, my third eye, if you will, my mind's eye opened up to this high elevation lake. And it was beautiful. I was able to look to my left and my right, and looking down on the sand was like this black onyx stones that was smooth and beautiful. And across the lake on the other side was a mountain. Behind the mountain was the sun setting behind it. And the sky was this beautiful purple to blue to pink and just so serene. And I felt that peace as I was seeing this in my mind's eye. Right. But what really surprised me was that on my left, I see Zoi coming to me. I'm not upset in this meditation. I see her, and her hair is the same color as it was when she died, but she's wearing this beautiful flowing chiffon type dress that has all these layers in it. And it's the same colors as the sky. And she comes up to me and we embrace, and I say, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Dad, I am more than okay." And I just started asking her a bunch of questions, Irene. And honestly, I don't remember half the questions I asked her, but what she said to me was just like, everything's good, Dad. It's okay, man. And the last thing she did say to me was that, "Look, Dad, I'm always going to be here. There's no time and space where I'm at. And so it doesn't matter if it's 1 day or 10 years, you can come back here and I'll be here." And when I came out of that meditation, it was my stop on the train.
You probably didn't want to come out of it ever either, right?
Yeah, but I didn't fall asleep. I mean, I know when I'm asleep, but I was not asleep, but 40 minutes had gone by and it felt like it was 5 minutes. And it was just the most beautiful experience. And I felt so warm after that, Irene. It was just a wonderful thing. And I've had several of those since that time. And each one is a different message for me, or a different piece of advice. Yeah, it was awesome. And so that's how Zoi and I communicate, I believe. And so a lot of people may not agree with that, but that's fine. This is just what works for me, and other people have what works for them.
Other people have their other experiences, but this works for you, and you're validating the experiences that people have that are similar to yours.
Yes.
And the other question I wanted to say, I love that you called it a Sherpa named Zoi, because a Sherpa is a mountain guide. That was very clever, Eric.
Yes.
And I'm sure in mountains, the fact that it's mountains because of the challenges of grief can feel like mountains also. So what inspired you to write your book, A Sherpa Named Zoi? And can you explain your 4-part process called MAPS, which addresses certain difficult questions that arise through grief? And I'm sure you do this with people you coach all the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So what inspired me to write the book, honestly, was just the catharsis of writing about losing her. I had no intention of actually putting it together in a book, but what I found to be very helpful in my journey about a year or so in was that I didn't want to forget these wonderful experiences of Zoi's life. And I was concerned at that point that the brain fog was going to cause me to forget about her, which I haven't, and you won't, or that I would stop loving her for some, and I haven't, and you won't, right? And so I found myself writing these stories about Zoi's life, but then I really wanted to dig in and understand how I've come to be able to navigate losing Zoi, because it didn't just happen at that point in my life. There were certain events that had happened earlier on in my childhood, all the way through my teens and into my early adulthood, where I had experienced loss. And I never really understood much about that until I started writing about it and how those earlier experiences affected me. And what I found was that at each point in a loss, no matter if that happens when you're a child or later in life, at some point you are guided. You are guided through. Zoe, to me, is my Sherpa. She is guiding me not only when she was here, but after she died. And the
Look how
process
much
that
growth you've had since all of this. Talk about having an amazing guide.
Yes, true. It's so true. And I developed the process of MAPS, which is, it's a 4-step process. And MAPS, M stands for mindfulness, which is being mindful of the thoughts that you have around your loss, that you have thoughts that come in. You don't necessarily have to accept them, but giving yourself permission to feel what you need to feel and to know that it's going to be a challenging process for you. Mindfulness, it also helps to relax your stress to some degree, in the sense that you don't have to let your mind go into these areas where you're really, really struggling and panicking. Now, sometimes you can't avoid that. Sometimes the emotional ups and downs are really challenging, but being mindful allows you to kind of come back down to ground.
Would you say being mindful kind of helps you to accept the situation a little bit more,
yes,
like observe it, as opposed to being victimized by it?
Yeah, and don't judge it. Like, you don't judge those thoughts, right? So yes, correct. And it's hard to, though, don't get me wrong, because your mind is, we are thinking creatures. And so it's very easy for us to, one thought to become this, and this, and a cascade into something that's really scary. And so being mindful is the practice of really helping you to kind of stay grounded as much as possible in that acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, the next is approach. And that is looking at options of ways that you can approach a situation or struggle that you're facing in your grief. And oftentimes there isn't just one option here. And a lot of times folks think that, well, if I can't have this person back, I can't move forward. But we have to find something that allows us to carry on and honor not only them, but ourselves. And it doesn't have to be just one thing. So there's some flexibility in there about what approach you take in that certain struggle. Maybe you feel
to even
guilty.
know that you have choices.
Yes.
To even know that you have choices in that struggle, right?
Correct. Right. To know that you have choices in that struggle. There isn't any one right way to navigate grief except for the one way that works for you. And that's so important. I think that people remember that, because we struggle, but we also grow. We also get stronger with that struggle. And the analogy I can use there is that if you're into bodybuilding, you're not going to build muscle without struggling to lift that weight. No pain, no gain, as they say. So it's, in this case, okay, that may be it may not be the greatest way to say that, but I think you get my.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Yes. So I totally get what you're saying. Yes.
So the P in this case is predict. And this is you thinking about and envisioning your future, where you're going to be a year from now with this new approach that you're taking. Because if you think about what isn't working, and if you want something to change, it's that definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. In this case, it's about taking that new approach that you're going to try. And if it doesn't work, you can always adjust it. But you're thinking about what's going to be on the other side of you working through that approach.
I would say, like, when I was working with my life transition coach, she would say to me, I want you to walk through new doors. And I'd cry, I don't want to walk through a new door. And she'd say, listen, I'm giving you permission to walk through. And if you don't like the feel of it, you can walk out and we'll find another door. But you have to, would you say that's in sync with
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. You're predicting, you're kind of thinking, of course, there's worry there. But at the same time, when you go through that door, you probably will find that it's not as bad as you think it is. Right. You're bracing, you're protecting yourself. You don't want to feel hurt anymore. And so, but yes, I think taking those steps forward, and please know that you're not beholden to that single path, that you might have to adjust, and that's okay. That actually helps. There's so many other examples probably in your life where you've had to make adjustments as you go that will get you to where you want to be.
Right.
So it's okay if you need to do that. But the final step in
your
MAPS.
Final step is my favorite.
It's embracing the suck. Now, I stole that term from the Navy SEALs, but it's a very powerful representation of embracing that this struggle is going to be hard, but there is something that's already within us. We already have what we need inside of us. It's about unlocking that. It's about giving ourselves permission to take that journey and to discover what is at that next step, and then the step after that, and after that.
Eric, why do you think that most people merely survive the loss of a loved one and struggle for the rest of their lives?
I feel that people struggle because, one, they don't know what to do and where to go, and that they also don't necessarily have a good support structure in place early on. They feel like they have to do this alone. And so when you're feeling isolated, when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling like nobody gets you, and you don't feel like you're supported, that is a good time for your mind to say, you know what? It's probably going to be like this for the rest of my life. And I'm just going to, if I can survive it, I'll be good. But I can tell you, Irene, that it's harder to just survive than it is to try to find your way through your grief.
You and I are proof of that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love this too, that you speak to forming new core values that help to fuel movement up and out of grief. That is so great, Eric. Could you guide us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, our core values. I didn't think about that much when I was writing the book. I really wanted to think about, well, what's driving me? What's giving me energy and direction here? And without having identified my core values at that point, I maybe just be wandering around. But when I sat down and I thought about what really drives my values, I came up with a list that is relatively long. I didn't put it in the book, and I probably should have, but let me give an example of some of these.
Sure,
so
please.
Some of the core values I have are understanding and support, community, compassion, empathy, energy, family, gratitude, forgiveness, acceptance, growth, love, purpose, integrity, strength, and stability. That's just
those are very positive core values, as opposed to other core values that other people have that could be very negative, that keep them stuck, right?
Correct. Well, it's a story that we tell ourselves, and I get it. I had moments. This was not an all positive journey, by the way. And please, I hope it's not coming across at that.
Not at all.
These are things that I had to discover along the way. But we have as much opportunity to create the positive aspects of our journey as we do to let the negative ones come in as well. And so it's a choice. It's a choice that we can make. And I know that it's really hard, especially if you're new to grief and you're like, this is just not going to get any better. I get it. And a lot of people say, I'm never going to be the same again. You're absolutely right. We're not going to be the same. However, we certainly can become another version of ourselves that actually reconnects with life, reconnects with others, works through that fog bank that I was describing earlier, and into that garden of compassion, connection, and companionship and support, right? And so,
wherever you go, you're still, that person that you lost is still embedded in your heart. You're taking
100%. Yes.
And they're probably very happy for what they're seeing as you're moving through.
Yes.
Another subject that you touch on that I love in your book is the concept of forgiveness. And you talk about forgiveness both to our loved ones for dying, which is a big, and to ourselves for what we perceive were our failings with them. And so you talk about forgiveness being one of the best gifts we can give ourselves in our grief. Educate us. Speak on.
I think a lot of times we feel like we were responsible for our loved one dying. Zoi took her life. And believe me, when a child takes their life, as a parent, you take on a lot of that as like, no, this was me. I can't even raise my child to adulthood. How the questions and the things that you say to yourself, they could be pretty dark. And I said some pretty dark things to myself along the way.
I was at the computer working, and why I wasn't there. I entered a room where I could have interceded. She seemed fine, but I should have known somehow.
Correct. And that's, I think, the challenging thing is that there's some empowerment there when you do forgive yourself. Why? I think Gandhi would educate us on this one as well and say that the forgiver is blessed with the release. And even if that's with yourself, it's okay. We did the best we could with what we had. I didn't have a crystal ball. I did everything that I could have. And I do believe that if the situation was reversed and I died and Zoi was still here, I wouldn't want her to feel guilty that she didn't do everything for me. I'd want her to carry on and live her life and be as happy as possible. So for me, I feel like Zoi would want the same for me, if that makes sense. And so That
Okay.
was but that's part of the self-forgiveness. It's really important. And you don't have to do it, but it really helps. It
Sure
really
it
helps.
does. Absolutely. And it is a great gift you can give yourself because you're not carrying around, you're not flagellating yourself,
Right.
you're not torturing yourself, right?
Correct.
And also another big, huge positive disruptor through grief is gratitude.
Yes.
So talk to us about the importance of gratitude and acceptance
Mm.
when you're dealing with grief.
Yeah. I remember early on when I was talking with Zoe's friends, we were keeping in touch with each other very often. I mean, we were talking 10 to 15-year-olds, 10 to 15 kids that were 15 to 18 years old.
Ugh, a
And
challenge just by itself.
yeah, but collectively, every one of these kids reminded me of Zoe. She impacted and imprinted herself on their lives in such a powerful way that when I was around them, I just felt so still connected to Zoe. And I remember having conversations with them early on because I would check in with them. How are you doing? I'm really having a hard time. I feel you. I am too. What's going on? And they would say to me, I'm just having a hard time accepting that she's gone. And I tell them the same thing. So am I. I mean, this isn't an age thing. This is just it's a grief thing. It's something that is really hard, but accepting that she's gone will allow you to move on to that forgiveness piece, because as hard as that acceptance is, it is honestly the start of your healing journey in a lot of ways. Because I've had some folks message me over the years, and I asked them, in their healing journey, what do they want the most? And they go, I just want my loved one back. And I would love to do that. I'd love to be able to provide that for you. Or for that to be the case. But okay, so we know that that's not an option. What's the next thing that you can do then? And a lot of them say that I think it's really just learning how to accept this, and then knowing that there is somebody there to support them on the other side of that acceptance. Because I feel like for a lot of folks, when they do accept it, it's a big, oh no, now what? And
So does acceptance lead to gratitude also?
acceptance, I think honestly, you have to forgive before you can get to gratitude, because you're freeing yourself. Gratitude for what is, and honestly for what was. I am so grateful that I got to be Zoe's dad. I'm still consider myself Zoe's dad. I always will. And I'm so proud of her. And I'm grateful for the 15 years that I had with her. I'm grateful for her sister and her brother. I'm grateful for her mom and the rest of the family. I'm grateful for her friends, for staying connected 10 years later. We're still very connected. I'm grateful for the people that I've met along the way, or the things that I've learned and things I've been able to help other people with. And so I feel like when my life is filled with that gratitude, Irene, that it really accelerates the healing.
I agree with that. And one of the things you speak about, and you talked about this in your TEDx talk, is what Zoe's death taught you about life. And you share this through your book, your coaching, your trainings. Want to give us a little taste of that today?
Yeah, I was so honored to be able to share Zoe with the world on that stage.
Takes a lot of courage to do that.
Thank you. And, it was scary. When I remember kind of walking out from the backstage towards the red circle, and my legs are going forward, but I felt like my body was pulling away, and it was a very surreal experience. But the practicing and my coaches were just unbelievable, because they understood the impact that I wanted to make with the talk. And I can't describe the experience of being in that room, and you could hear a pin drop, because it was just, I got to tell people about my daughter, and I hopefully made them laugh. I know that it impacted a lot of folks, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that life can go on. We don't have, just because we lost our loved one doesn't mean that our life is lost too. It's important for us to survive first, but then get back up and live beyond the loss of a loved one.
It's beautiful. And you also talk about the tracks we leave that are our legacy. And I'd like to know what will be your personal tracks left. I have a feeling I kind of know, but you want to talk about those tracks? You and I are both laying down a lot of tracks, Eric.
Yes, absolutely. And I learned this. I just want to share that I learned this from one of my former coaches. His name is retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, former Green Beret. And he learned this from his father, who was a wildland firefighter. And they spent a lot of time in the woods growing up. And what tracks are, it's not so much the footprints, but it's those indelible marks that you leave on other people's lives that last long after you're gone. And so when I first did this exercise at one of Scott's workshops, it made me break down in tears. I'm talking 3 years after Zoe died, and I'm boo-hooing in the corner because I'm discovering what my legacy is going to be for the rest of my days on this planet, whether that's another day, another 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, I don't know. And that is that I'm going to do everything in my power to help people walk through grief and get to the other side so that they can reconnect and live beyond the loss of their loved one, not just survive.
It's beautiful. Also, you coached and trained thousands of grieving women and men on how to navigate this terrible setback that many of us experience in life. And you explain the difference between asking, why did this happen to me, to a new mindset that asks, why is this happening for me? That's a great thing to imbue people with. So wonderful.
I appreciate that, because I think that when we suffer setbacks in life, it actually keeps us stuck. When we say to ourselves, why did this happen to me? Why me? This is ridiculous. All this stuff always happens to me. I don't know. I don't think I've ever been able to get unstuck with that mindset. And so, look, it's not your fault if you're thinking that way. It's just that maybe there's a different way to approach this. That, okay, well, what can this setback do for me that can actually help me grow and become a better person, stronger, more resilient? And it doesn't matter what that setback is. You could have I've lost 4 jobs. I've been laid off from 4 jobs in the last 10, 15 years. Each time, while it's been a shock, it was a setback. And instead of it bringing me to my knees, I'm like, okay, there's a different opportunity available here for me to grow and figure something out. I have to figure something out right now. Now, I'm not saying that you lost your loved one as a lesson. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that there is an opportunity here to honor yourself and honor your loved one by learning new ways to take care of yourself, to get stronger, to navigate your way through the setback, no matter what it is. And so in that case, it's actually working for you in that. Instead of saying, why me, say, why not me? I can do this. I can get through this. I can find my way. I can survive. I can get back up, and I can live beyond the loss.
I hear you saying that you're taking yourself from a victim mindset to an empowered set.
Yes. Yeah. And it's really difficult when you lose a loved. It taps into something deep inside of your core when you lose a loved one. And you're going to react or respond based on your highest level of training that you've had in your life. When I say training, I'm talking about ways that you've learned how to deal with setbacks up to that point. And so if you were a kid and you had some setbacks and you were just able to navigate, survive getting through that, you're bringing that same type of mindset into this, and now on top of the grief that you feel. And so it feels amplified. So easy. So again, it's not your fault. Somebody told me something recently that I thought was very powerful. And that is that it may not be your fault and your responsibility for what happened to you, but it is your responsibility with what you do with it moving forward.
I love
it. And you can't change what happened, but you can certainly change what happens next.
That's beautiful. I think now everybody wants to get a hold of you, those who are grieving and all. So let's tell them about your online courses, your online community, your live workshops. You also have one-on-one coaching, and you have a special offer for us today.
Yes. So thank you. I have a course that I put together a while ago called MAPS. It actually walks people through the 4 steps of navigating the questions that they have most in their grief of their loss. I have a membership program that I put together for folks to come in, where I'm actually walking with them hand in hand on the journey through what I call the 5 steps of that. And that's getting support, getting steady on your feet, feeling like you're stable in terms of being okay, and then finding some sturdiness and then getting to strength. And that membership is something that I put together because I want people like you and I were talking earlier, Irene, about making progress. It's so important to make progress in that it's easy to stay stuck, but if you can actually get a great foundation of support, you're more likely to keep that momentum going and to figure out with other people in that community of how to move forward. And so there's that. And then I do also have a 1 hour workshop that I just put on that's called the Emotional Relief Workshop. It's a 1 hour. My next one's happening in July. And it's a 1 hour workshop where I walk through how to navigate and reduce your emotional overwhelm in less than 90 seconds using some breath exercises. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, I'm certified as a breath coach. And so I take that, and we have the capacity to be able to reduce our emotional overwhelm, especially when we're grieving, in a very quick way if we learn how to do that. And so I teach that in that workshop. And then, so yes, I do have a special offer today.
And you do one-on-one coaching also.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So, yes, I do one-on-one coaching. If folks want to work with me one-on-one to really dive in on the struggle that they're going through, their grief, I work with folks one-on-one on a weekly basis. And I just go in and I talk to them. I find out what's really getting at them. And then we work together to develop a plan to help them move through that. Again, it's all about progressing through that.
And what's your special offer today?
I just appreciate this so much that I wanted to make my book free for everybody. And so I have, so generous. Thank you. And I've covered the cost of the printing. All I ask is that folks cover the cost of shipping and handling. And I want to make sure that people have another resource available to them to know that they can walk through grief and live with intention with their lives as well, especially after they lose a loved one.
Should they get on your website too? Well, I guess we'll supply all the links for that in the interview.
Yes.
So that'll be the way they can get a hold of that. And it is a wonderful book. I read it and
Thank you so much.
Recommend it. And in what ways do you continue to revisit your own path of grief so that it will collapse the time it will take others to heal? And why do you say it's important to heal, Eric, and that healing takes place in the present moment? Now we're talking about my sweet spot. Let's talk about healing.
I appreciate that question, Irene. And I do feel like it's important to heal because I don't think I'd be honoring Zoi. I think she'd be upset if she didn't see me trying to live my life again. I will see her again. I will be reunited, and I'd rather sit with her and tell her about my experiences that I've had since she left. I feel like it's going to feel like no time has gone by at all.
And she's learning from you because she's with you.
Yes, and she is. She's always with me. And so healing, it's okay to heal. We don't have to stay stuck in our grief. It's okay to heal. We did everything we could for our loved one. And we're human. We're not wizards. We don't have magic what are they called? Crystal balls. And so we have to figure out what's going to work for us. And it's okay to take that path because there are better days ahead. And you deserve role that.
Model too. Yep.
Yeah. And you can honor your loved one much better in that space than if you're stuck. And if you're stuck, by the way, it's not your fault. I just invite you to look at opportunities to grow and move through that grief so that you can get unstuck and get back up.
Sounds great. And what is the Eric 3-step process to finding joy in life?
The 3-step process to find joy in life is honestly to accept where you are, give yourself permission to figure out what you're working on, and just take the next step in front of you each time.
And we'll get to joy.
And you will. Yes. Just keep walking. Just keep on taking that next step. You can't take all the steps at once. You can only take the next step that's in front of you.
And Eric, since we're talking about your book, which you're so generously offering to people in our audience, I love this quote from your book, A Sherpa Named Zoi. When we have energy and direction in life, we lead more purposeful, meaningful, and happier lives. We thrive. Moving toward these better days is a journey and not a destination, just as life itself is. While your work is centered around grief support, you share a wider message that syncs with this podcast, that no matter the loss or setback in life, we can find ways to get up and live beyond our loss, fill the gap between loss and love, and ultimately honor the ones we love for the rest of our lives.
Yes.
Thank you from my heart, Eric, for this insightful, inspiring, and very meaningful interview today.
Thank you so much, Irene. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's
My
wonderful.
pleasure. And here is a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. As I like to say, to be continued, many blessings. Thank you so much, Eric, and bye for now.
Thank you.